You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Welcome to We Are Libertarians. My name is Chris Spangle, and I am out of the studio once again. Harry was sick this week, and we didn't end up having a Tuesday show as a result because he was a game time decision. So he's had the flu the last week, but he says he's starting to feel better. So we'll look forward to talking with Harry again on Tuesday. I haven't seen him in like 2 or 3 weeks, so it's very rare. I'm looking forward to getting back into a routine. But I have been so busy with traveling, and work has been very busy with a bunch of new projects, and I am candidly working on several new projects behind the scenes for not only We Are Libertarians, but also personally. I get asked all the time about building a podcast empire like Dear Leader has built here at We Are Libertarians, and I don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over, so I figured I should start a podcast about podcasting, which I'm going to do very soon. If you don't listen to the Chris Spangle Show, then there's a lot of podcasts about podcasting there to tide you over. So, but I wanted to put this into the feed and talk with you a little bit before I play this about what's going on with Facebook, YouTube, Google, and Twitter. Now, today, it came out that Steven Crowder was banned on YouTube and on Twitter. So Steven Crowder, if you don't know who he is, he's with CRTV, which is a conservative/libertarian TV network. They have Matt Kibbe, who used to be with FreedomWorks, a lot of libertarian programming there. Gavin McInnes, who I would say is sort of libertarian. A lot of these conservative commentators now are beginning to say they're libertarian. They don't hold traditional libertarian beliefs. Like I like Ben Shapiro, but when you hear Ben Shapiro talk about foreign policy, he's very unlibertarian. But on things like the budget and taxes, he's very libertarian in those respects. So Crowder calls himself a libertarian. I wouldn't say that he's an orthodox libertarian, but he is definitely within our wheelhouse. And I would say he's a mainstream conservative. Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire are mainstream conservatives. They don't say things that are particularly beyond the pale. They're certainly not hate speech. The thing with Crowder and with Gavin McInnes and some of the CRTV folks, they do like to push the envelope. They do like to be provocative to get a reaction from the left, because that's what their audiences love. I've talked a lot about how if I wanted to make more money at this, then I really should just start pretending that I'm Tommy Lauren and just saying exactly what conservatives want to hear, or the Young Turks saying what Democrats want to hear, or even, my dear friend Roger Paxton, who I disagree with on not a lot of substance, but a lot of strategy. He caters to the black and yellow anarcho-capitalist crowd, because that's what he believes. It's not necessarily a financial choice. I think Tommy Lauren believes what she says. I think she's just not that bright. Roger is a bright person. But if I were to just say, yeah, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, here's what I believe, and interview a bunch of Mises, Misesian thinkers from the Mises Institute, I'd probably have more downloads than I do. I would probably be up in Dave Smith or Tom Woods territory at this point, but I am not as certain as those guys. I'm just a person that asks a lot of questions and tries to wrestle with a lot of stuff, and also working in politics has really made me go, yeah, I love philosophy and I'm into it, but I also think there's other problems. Anyways, I'm so far away from where I was supposed to be. Now, you look at someone like Steven Crowder, who is provocative, who does try to do things to get a reaction, but he's not that far out of the mainstream of conservatism and what most people think. He is not somebody that I think is a bigot, but I do think that he is racially or, intersectionally provocative. I may have just created a term. And he did this video, which I haven't watched all the way through, but where he crashed some LGBT event, and YouTube took it down, and then Twitter suspended him for promoting it, saying that it violated their terms of service, their community standards, and it was removed. Anybody that tried to share it from his staff got bans. They got a 7-day ban on Crowder's Twitter account. And even though the content is not necessarily, let's be honest, it's not a discussion of like Socratic philosophy. It's provocative for provocative sake, trying to make a point, and probably one that not a lot of libertarians would agree with. But here's where I come down on it. Yes, libertarians love to make the property rights argument. And I am fully 100% supportive of the argument that these companies own their servers, they own their property, they can associate with who they want, and if they don't want Steven Crowder, or really anybody, on their platforms, they can get rid of them. It's as simple as that. If I wouldn't have some people on this network, I wouldn't have Richard Spencer, for instance, on the network with a podcast or even an interview. I think he's a racist, and I wouldn't want. There's nothing that he and I have to discuss, and I don't want to be associated with him. So I'm not going to use my platform to give him a platform. So I totally am supportive of that argument. Now, We Are Libertarians is not the same thing as Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Apple and Amazon and these big companies. They are like 98% of the internet isn't accessible because it's not on Google. So you see 2% of the internet because that's what you can Google search. The 2 out of every 5 minutes for most people is spent on Facebook. Twitter it dominates what is actually part of the news. YouTube is, as I've said, one of the greatest achievements in human knowledge. Anybody can put anything up, and anyone can have a discussion, and reaction videos take place, and it's a beautiful thing. And so I find it sad that such a powerful, so all of these tools, but YouTube especially, such a powerful tool for free speech, is giving into censorship from the left that uses intersectional politics. If you don't know what that term means, it's identity politics, as a blunt force weapon to silence other people's speech. It's really disappointing that these companies are giving into that. But we all said when Google and Facebook gave in to China to get into that market, and they started allowing censorship to happen on their platforms, well, it's only a matter of time before it comes to America, and it's here. And conservative voices, mainstream conservative voices, are being completely demonetized. They're taking the content and not putting it in the algorithm. Okay, so there was a tool online that I used to search my Twitter handle, and I've been shadow banned on several tweets, which means I tweeted something out, it showed up on my timeline, but none of my followers actually saw that tweet because Twitter scans it and says, this is content we don't want on the platform. I don't think anybody that listens to this podcast would think that I'd ever tweet anything out that would be outrageous. Prager University on YouTube has been hidden from several different angles, both demonetized, taken out of the algorithm. Prager University is run by a man named Dennis Prager, who is, I think he's Jewish, but he's definitely within the Christian conservative realm, talks a lot about philosophy and values. He's certainly not an offensive person. He's even had liberals like Alan Dershowitz on his PragerU, and he's suing YouTube. And here's the thing. So we have the property rights argument that is valid. It is their servers. They can do what they want. But are they getting to a point where they're committing fraud? Where they're saying in their terms of service, we will behave this way and we will apply this equally to all, and then they don't do that. As Ben Shapiro pointed out, why is Steven Crowder being taken off of Twitter, but Louis Farrakhan, who is a virulent anti-Semite, still on Twitter? So you're not applying this equally to everyone. You are clearly targeting one strain of ideology, and that's a problem. And anybody that understands the non-aggression principle, the foundational axiom of the libertarian movement is that you cannot initiate force to achieve social or political goals. Well, included in force is defrauding someone. If you lie to someone, if you cheat, if you steal, that is a violation of the non-aggression principle. At what point are these companies starting to commit fraud and saying, no, we treat everyone equally. This is just a mistake. We'll fix it. Well, we're not stupid, okay? You're not treating it fairly. And what I fear is that libertarians are being too meek and too mild on this for the property rights argument and not standing up for the right of free speech. We are very good on gun rights and property rights, but we are weak when it comes to free speech, especially right-leaning libertarians. They go, well, I just don't like what they have to say, but it's their right to say. Stop being a pussy. Austin Petersen got banned from Facebook. A 30-day ban for a drawing of an AR-15. I'm not kidding. And he basically went on a campaign. He contacted Glenn Beck and every right-leaning media outlet or independent media outlet or anyone that would have a conversation with him and started doing a press junket about how he is banned from Facebook. Well, 3 or 4 days into the ban, he was given access to his Facebook page. And I think, Brian will cover this in his interview, but I think it's within 30 days of the primary where he's running in Missouri for the Republican Senate nomination. And, he's showing photos of Claire McCaskill, his opponent, with executives of Facebook and Twitter and Hillary Clinton's campaigns. I mean, it's laughable, but it's actually really scary because these companies are incredibly powerful over the way that Americans think, and we have to hold them accountable. Austin Petersen did the right thing. Austin Petersen said, yes, they do have property rights, but I also have a right to free speech, and you don't have the right to commit fraud against me. You don't have a right to try and fix an election. And I'm not going to use government force to stop you, but by God, I'm going to fight you and raise awareness about your bad business practices. That's exactly what we need to be doing. And he was reinstated today. And he gave an interview to one of the shows on our network, the Brian Nichols Show, which is a great podcast. It's Nichols for Brian Nichols. You can find it at WeirdLibertarians.com. I'm not a fan of interviews. I just don't like doing them. It's not what this show is about. This show is really about a group of friends conversing about politics. And I would like to do more interviews, but I just don't have the time and I just don't have the inclination, really. Brian likes to do interviews, and I'm glad to have him on the network because I'm really excited to have somebody on the network that will talk to people like Austin and get their point of view. And Brian doesn't just talk to libertarians. He talks to conservatives and liberals and has debates about things like the environment. So I would really love for you to check out his podcast and take a listen to it. It's not just an interview show. He does a lot of cool different things. He's about 10 episodes in, and we're getting great feedback on the show, and I would love to see our audience pick that up and start listening to Brian on a weekly basis. It comes out on Friday. Again, you can get that at WeirdLibertarians.com. So with that, I want to replay his interview with Austin Petersen. They start out talking about the Facebook incident, and then they move on to talk about a bunch of other things like immigration and abortion and other things that Austin is just so well spoken. Like, I would love to have the ability to speak like Austin Petersen, but I don't know if I have a fat tongue or what, but he's so intelligent and eloquent, and I think you'll really enjoy this interview by Brian Nichols with Austin Petersen.
Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. I'm your host, Brian Nichols, and today we have a special show because I am joined by, many of you probably know him here on this network. It is the current candidate for the U.S. Senate out in Missouri. He is running for the Republican nomination. You know him from being the former Libertarian presidential candidate and also founder of the Libertarian Republic, Austin Petersen. Austin, thank you so much for joining today. How you doing today?
Great, thanks for having me on.
Awesome, man. Hey, as you all know, you can find Austin at Twitter at AP for Liberty, as well as on Facebook at AP for Liberty. And also, feel free to go ahead, if you're interested in his campaign, find him on www.austinpetersen.com. And Austin, your name has been in the news as of late. For I guess it's a little disheartening for you as a guy running for U.S. Senate. It turns out that you have been suspended by the great old Mark Zuckerberg there on Facebook for an AR-15 giveaway that you did in the past that you also were suspended for but got revoked. So Austin, maybe you can just fill us in a little bit. What's been going on there with this Facebook ban as of late?
Well, in order to avoid the ban this time, like we did last time, instead of holding up the gun in the video, I decided that I would draw a picture of an AR-15. And for some reason, that was still too dangerous for Facebook. So I got another 30-day ban for doing what any good conservative would do, which is to give away an AR-15 rifle to my supporters to raise money and awareness of my belief in the Second Amendment. And so here we are, 30-day ban, day 2, and still no end in sight. So the thing that sort of made this last time a big national story was the fact that Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, has contributed the maximum amount to Claire McCaskill in this election, which is where we get sort of the interest in this. People want to know, well, hey, are they interfering in this election? Because we hear a lot from Facebook about Russian election interference, and yet here we are seeing them interfering in an election here in Missouri. So we just want to know what's up.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems obviously a little suspicious when I know I watched some of your supporters there who are rightfully pointing out that there's a lot of other gun giveaways that are on Facebook, and suspiciously none of those are being flagged for being a violation of terms of service. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot of conservatives who have complained about censorship on Twitter and on Facebook. And so I think that many of these social media platforms have a far left bias, very difficult to prove. But I mean, I don't hear a lot of leftists complaining about getting banned. So I have to wonder if it isn't just us. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, but when you start to see enough, dots on a line, you wonder if there isn't a pattern,
Oh, absolutely. And that leads to a good question, because obviously here we are, we are almost a month now removed from the Parkland, Florida shooting. I know you went up to my old stomping grounds up in the North Country there in New York, and you were greeted by the wonderful liberal students of St. Louis University with a sign that said, "Mr. Petersen, do you care more about AR-15s than children's lives?" But hey, kudos to them for spelling your name right.
Yeah.
But it did lead to a couple of questions, and obviously I've been getting questions here from a lot of supporters, but also curious individuals with regards to your campaign. And one of the questions I got was from Derek, and it was his question was, in light of the recent school shootings, the main question that he had was, and let me pull it up here. Everywhere there's been an improved call for mental health screenings, healthcare options. So with that being said, what specific types of improvement in the mental health field would you push for in Senate? And with that being said, what concrete ways could we help find and care for those that may eventually pose a risk to themselves or others?
Well, obviously, mental health is probably at fault for many of these killings. But the problem with that is that it opens up a big can of worms, because, if you're looking strictly at mental health, perhaps half of this country could be assumed to have some sort of mental health issue. I mean, what qualifies perhaps as having mental issues? Do ADHD, autism, right? what exactly would contribute, be a contributing factor to determine whether or not someone might or might not have the right to bear arms. And consider we have to have due process, right, before we could step in and say, hey, before we could take somebody's guns away, there has to be at least some level, some semblance of due process. A lot of veterans who return with PTSD are worried about some of the pushes on the mental health question, because they're worried that if they have PTSD because they've been fighting for our freedoms overseas, are they going to lose their freedoms if they come back and are diagnosed with PTSD, right? So those are all real big questions that we have to answer. And what exactly the role of the federal government is, quite frankly, I don't know at this point. But here's the thing. I mean, if you're looking at it as a societal issue, if you look at some of the contributing factors, many of these school shooters, they don't have good fathers. Right. I think like out of all of the shooters recently that's come out, many of them just did not have good fathers. But why exactly is that the case? Well, I don't know. And what is the role of the federal Senate have to be able to solve that problem? Well, I don't know. That's the problem. People want answers from their government. They want the government to do something, but quite frankly, what government does is usually worse than the problem itself. So we do need to study this issue, and we do need to consider that there are some constitutional barriers for us in order to take certain types of action before we can move forward.
Agreed. Again, Brian Nichols here with Austin Petersen, U.S. Senate candidate for the great state of Missouri. Next question I had, Austin. Now, obviously, you got a lot of your name recognition as being a member of the Libertarian Party, but also with your run there back in 2016 for the Libertarian nomination for president. Now, I did have one question that was raised up here. This is from Stone, and it is a two-part question. The first saying, Austin, do you see the Republican Party as a means to an end or just an end? By that, meaning specifically, can we achieve liberty, including minarchy, using the Republican Party, or is it just a tool to bring the country closer to libertarianism, so that the LP is more influential when we hit conservatives and Tea Partiers' stopping point?
Parties are just tools. Parties are ways for you to advance an idea. The thing is that with political parties, like they're a bit of a double-edged sword, right? They can be used for good or they can be used for bad. So I would say that parties themselves are not ends, unless you're just like somebody trying to be a party apparatchik and be a ladder climbing career politician and use a party for your own ends. I would say, it's just a way for you to advance your principles. And every party has its problems. So I think that the Republican Party has its problems, so do the Democrats, and the Libertarian Party does as well. So if you're advancing a cause, if you're advancing an idea, then I think that you're doing the right thing for a party. If you're just trying to advance a singular political party, then I question what your true motives are.
It's actually right in line. I actually had one of your first endorsement gentlemen there, Dean Clancy. He was on my show back a few weeks ago, and very similar mindset with regards to, as you just pointed out, parties are the vessels to bring the principles into Washington. So, kudos to you for I guess I want to say jumping ship, but keeping your principles and going to the GOP to help, follow the likes of Justin Amash and Thomas Massey and Rand Paul. So kudos to you there. Now, Stone had another follow-up question for this. And it does focus more specifically on the GOP as a whole, saying, Austin, also, do you believe that the GOP is moving towards either A, a conservative libertarian movement like Rand Paul, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck, B, a more alt-right populist movement with the likes of Bannon, Trump, Spencer, and Milo, or C, will continue to be filled with quote-unquote establishment do-nothings like Romney, Ryan, and McConnell?
Great question, but I'm not sure that the question is phrased in a way that I could answer it in total. I think that where we are right now is with Trump populism, but I would say that it's possible that the future could be a more Ben Shapiro, Rand Paul, Glenn Beck, Austin Petersen style movement, as long as we can get some victories. It's one of the key reasons why I'm running, is so that we can actually push towards that more conservative libertarian alliance that I've been talking about. But of course, there are some problems, because in order for that to happen, we sort of have to lay down our arms. We've been taking up arms against one another. Conservatives are going to have to accept the libertarian position on government, and libertarians are going to need to accept the conservative view of institutions, families, friends, neighbors, and churches in order for us to solve the problems of society without the without the government. So it really just depends on whether or not we can sort of put our egos to the side and actually work towards the betterment of our country.
So, would it be fair to say that I don't want to be like the Jordan Petersen interview where I say, so what you're saying is, but would it be fair to say that you're basically saying, looking at the way things are now, that a pragmatic approach to small L libertarianism, using the likes of a Rand Paul or Justin Mash, Thomas Massey, Mike Lee, that's going to be the more practical approach going forward?
Yes, I believe so. But again, it's going to require some sacrifice on both sides for us to sort of, stop being at each other's throats. And, I don't agree with Ben Shapiro on certain things, right? But the fact that Ben Shapiro doesn't want to use the government to force me to agree with his views on certain social issues isn't going to stop me from making an alliance with somebody like Ben Shapiro because he believes in my view of government. As long as you don't want to use the government to force me to believe what it is that you want to believe, what it is that you believe, then that's fine. I get to live the life that I want to live, free of interference and free from coercion and force. But that's a challenge because we as libertarians, we're a much smaller group. We have some authority, we have some force. The libertarian movement has been able to make me a force in Missouri, but not on its own. A lot of conservatives are supporting me. A lot of evangelical Christians are supporting my campaign, and without them, I couldn't have come as far as I am. So we've got to be able to reach across the aisle and start finding common ground and working towards the goals that we really want to see happen.
I swear you have my questions laid out in front of you, even though I know you don't, because that was a perfect segue into the next question I had. This comes from Maggie. She's from Tennessee, and she says, Austin, I'm in suburban Tennessee, so finding someone vocal in politics who is also not an active member of a faith community is quite rare. Even rarer is someone who is not a part of a church and is also pro-life. I definitely do not think that a person has to be religious to be pro-life, but I would love to hear how you, Austin, arrived at your beliefs about abortion and how, if you plan to act on them in Senate.
Really good question. The question is it a human life? And if I want to be consistent, do all humans deserve the same right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I think the answer to the first question is yes, and the answer to the second question is decidedly yes. So how we determine exactly how it is a human is a question for science. So sometimes when I'm out on the campaign trail, I'll ask people, if scientists were to find a cluster of cells on Mars, what would they call it? Well, almost everyone answers life. So then why doesn't that logic apply to the unborn in the womb? I think it does. And the problem, of course, is that the most politically incorrect thing that you can tell anyone is that they need to be personally responsible, right? Because that's the problem, is that we're using abortion as a form of birth control, not to, I think the amount of instances that it's used in order to save the life of the mother, or for something related to that, or for exceptions in case of rape are minuscule compared to people who see it as something for convenience or as a form of birth control. But when it comes to my power in the Senate, what are some of the things that I think we can do? Well, was one of the things that we can do that requires the least amount of coercion is you could legalize birth control over the counter. That's been statistically proven to reduce the number of abortions in a society or in a nation or in a culture, right? But that in itself is a challenge, because a lot of my conservative friends say, oh, no, we don't want that. Even though they state that, many of them are single issue voters on the question of abortion. I want fewer abortions, right? If this is going to reduce the number of abortions, then I'm definitely for it, because I want to save lives. But I'm pro-life in part because, too, I think that it's that the left has dehumanized the unborn. In a way, their arguments are always rely on eugenics, right? And they claim that one life is more valuable than another. And I think that's wrong, that's inhuman, that dehumanizes people, and that if we want to be a civilization that dehumanizes the unborn, why not go full-blown eugenics, right? Well, let's just say, here's the thing. Many on the alt-right, you talked about the alt-right earlier, like Richard Spencer's of the world, they're not pro-life. right? They're not pro-life. Do you know why? Because they want to see that they're pro-life for white babies, but not for minorities, right? They don't care if people of other races or cultures, kill, slaughter their children en masse. And isn't that a horrible, destructive, evil, totalitarian ideology? Isn't that something we as conservatives or libertarians want to resist? Absolutely. We should humanize the unborn. We should encourage people to be personally responsible. We should look for every solution that we can to save life. And I think that science is pushing further and further towards more solutions that are less coercive. But we as a society do need to pressure one another socially out there and help convince as a culture, because I think we've lost the argument. And we need to win the cultural debate about whether or not the unborn is a human. I think it is, and I think we need to defend that at all costs.
Amen. I can't agree more. Now this kind of goes back to the point you were making earlier. You're speaking with regards to Ben Shapiro and how. Yes, you will agree with Ben, let's say 90% of the time. I'm just using that as an arbitrary number. And then there's the other 10% of the time we'll say that you have a fundamental disagreement on policy. So we had William here. He just pointed out in a question saying that he's curious with regards to your opinion on foreign policy, as that seems to be the area where the likes of a Austin Petersen would have a disagreement with the likes of a Ben Shapiro. So could you kind of dig in, Austin, in terms of, if you were elected to Senate, what will your approach to foreign policy be, number one, looking at the likes of Syria, but also with regards to looking at our future/current relationship with the UN?
Right. Well, I'm not a big fan of the United Nations. I don't think it serves our interests. I think we should conduct diplomacy in a more unilateral fashion. I prefer that the United States pull out of the UN entirely. That being said, when it comes to our foreign policy, I think that there's a difference between national defense and militarism. I don't think we ought to be skimping on national defense. I think we need a strong national defense. But where we ought to be pulling back is on militarism, right? Policing the world. Why is it that American soldiers are still policing streets in Kabul and Iraq and Afghanistan? I think that we've far exceeded the proper authority that should be granted to the executive in these matters. I think Congress needs to take a more active role. I think that Congress needs to assert its proper authority and war-making powers. I mean, nobody now looks back and says, oh, Libya was a good idea. And now we're saying the same thing about Iraq. Obviously, we were attacked from Afghanistan, so there had to be something done there. But I think the problem is, of course, as government grants more and more war powers to the executive, the tendency is for the government to grow. And we do have, like what Dwight Eisenhower said, there is a tendency of the military-industrial complex to affect our democratic processes, right? There's in every single congressional district in the United States, there's a piece being manufactured for a jet plane or a tank or some sort of military equipment that impacts our elections, right? To bring jobs to districts. So that's the problem. But Ludwig von Mises and others were very clear about war and the Keynesian fallacy, or the broken window fallacy, that wartime prosperity brings about a general wealth. And because if that were true, like I think Ludwig von Mises famously said that war brings about prosperity like a plague, right, or like a hurricane or a tornado or a disaster, right? It's a broken window fallacy. If we really wanted to stimulate our economy because war was good, right, or wartime production was good, why don't United States and Japan just go back to war? We send all of our fleets and carriers out in the middle of the ocean to fight each other and sink them to the bottom, and we'll have increased our wealth, right? That's not how it works. So frankly, I think that we've overextended ourselves militarily, and I think we need to have a more prudent foreign policy.
All right, can't complain there. Now, this next question, it's a long one, so I'm going to break it down into three parts, and it all does focus primarily on immigration. So, this comes from Nick. He goes, Austin, my primary contention with your views is your position on illegal aliens. I understand and agree, in principle, with your positions, but Milton Friedman certainly had the most practical view on illegal aliens. With this in mind, I wonder, and here's the first part of the question. Number one, how do you, Austin Petersen, propose to maintain the integrity of our elections if non-citizens are allowed to come and go freely without regulation?
Well, I don't think that non-citizens should be allowed to vote. I actually depart with some of the libertarians on things like voter ID laws. To me, a vote is a vote to use force against me, right? You're trying You're asking the government to use force to enforce a law on your behalf. Sometimes I like to joke that every law should end with the sentence, ... or we will kill you. Because ultimately, that's what every law does. But the problem with immigration, to me, is that we have a broken system. I want more legal immigration, less illegal immigration. But economics is about incentives. If you incentivize people to break the law like we do with our current system, you're going to have more illegal immigration. If you incentivize people to obey the law, then you're going to have more legal immigration. Now, the problem, I think, is that the debate is been hijacked by the two extremes. You've got one group of people who says, no borders whatsoever, open borders, right, and the nation state. And then you've got people on the other end. I was at a Trump rally the other day. Somebody shouted behind me, no immigrants, no immigration. And I just wanted to turn around and say, no immigration? Like, as in zero? Like none at all? I mean, how are you gonna pull something like that off, right, without becoming a totalitarian state? Right. So we have to have policies that benefit Americans. Yes, absolutely. I believe in America first. But frankly, I think the problem is that because of the way that we've structured our immigration law right now, if it takes 10 to 25 years to become an American citizen, people are going to break the law. So let's have a simple, strict security check, simple, strict disease check, pass a citizenship test, pledge allegiance to the United States, and then you're done.
All right, good answer. Because that actually kind of leads right into the second question from Nick here. So his next question was, Austin, how do you reconcile your pro Second Amendment position, particularly with regard to protecting your own property, and with a lack of protection on our borders? So I guess more specifically, how can you say that you are a firm believer in having the Second Amendment to protect your personal property, but then not having the ability to protect your national property being borders? That
Well,
makes sense?
I mean, it does, but it's a fallacious claim because public is public and private is private. You don't own the borders, right? It doesn't belong to you, right? This is a question of public property versus private property. And if you take a look, unfortunately, there's something within like 100-mile radius from the borders. It's a constitution-free zone where police can set up checkpoints and stop citizens and search their cars, and you lose due process and your Fourth Amendment rights. So don't tell me that that's your private property. Otherwise, I have reason to come in and blast you in the head for taking away my Fourth Amendment rights, right? I could step onto your property and say, hey, well, in this constitution-free zone that you've set up, it's your private property. You're taking away my Fourth Amendment rights. Well, I'm having a revolution against you right now. I'm going to grab my flintlock and start killing some redcoats. So the problem, of course, again, lies in, I think, the base of economic illiteracy that is going around out there right now. People don't understand economics. They don't understand how incentives works. They see only what is seen. They never see what is unseen. And unless people start reading a little bit more Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, and Ludwig von Mises, we're never going to be able to come to an understanding on this. Because at the end of the day, once you debunk all of the economic fallacies that are being presented in this, and once you debunk all of the legal fallacies and the differences between private property and public property, then at the end of the day, they'll just back up to say, well, it's my culture. Well, I just went through a pretty strict, severe Canadian border checkpoint, right? And these people are supposed to be the most tolerant people on earth, right? And they were telling me, is there anyone else who can do your job here in Canada? And I'm like, well, no, of course, no. Is there anybody else who can do your job in Canada? My culture is my culture. Your culture is your culture. We have different cultures in the United States, and that's respected through the freedom of speech. And, quite frankly, I prefer taco trucks to gravy fries. So if you're going to if you're going to have a border wall, put it on the northern border, because at least south of the border, we get tasty tacos. But I don't like the poutine. So you want to force your views on me? So then fine, I'll turn around and force my views on you. You're going to eat gravy fries then, So it's so that's the problem, is that once the economic fallacies are debunked, you see that it just lies in a simple disagreement over cultural issues, which really the government has no role in protecting.
See, you didn't get the right poutine. That's the problem. You got to go to Sergi's in Canton, New York. They have the best poutine you can possibly have. That's the problem. You didn't get that.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's the issue.
All right, awesome. And then, so Nick, he was really into this immigration discussion. So he did have one final follow-up question, and I think it comes from more of a personal position he has, and I'll cover that at the end of this question. So he goes, finally, as you're being a very principled person, as he is himself, at what point do you, Austin, bend a little to accommodate reality? That being the concerning reality being that people are coming here to enjoy our generous benefits and not assimilate, creating a highly dependent, further in debt, and balkanized USA. The reason he brings this up is that he said, as a first-generation German and Filipino immigrant, both sides of his family aggressively assimilated and embraced American values, and he has concerns about people bringing inferior cultures to the United States.
Well, define inferior culture. I mean, I think
he's more specifically referring to, like, Sharia law, the Islamic fundamentalism and the likes.
Right. If you want to live and operate in the United States, then you operate under the constitutional law system, right? You respect the Bill of Rights, and if you want to be an American citizen, then you pledge allegiance to the United States and our culture and our laws. But frankly, we have when you talk about balkanization, we have multiple different religions here in the United States. Many of them are very secretive. Many of them operate privately. You have Mormons in Utah who want to, they have their own private culture. You've got Jews in Brooklyn, very Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn, and they have their own form of system of law and arbitration that they have, right? And then Muslims want to practice their own system of arbitration in certain ways, right? It's just because you don't care for their culture. Listen, I'm not a part of any of those cultures, right? But I respect all of their religious freedoms. So that's what we have in the United States. If you're not willing to respect religious freedom in the United States, then yes, don't come here, right? If you're not willing to respect our system of laws, then yes, don't come here. But, you're even allowed in the United States the freedom of speech to say that you don't respect our laws or our culture, and you're even allowed to use the democratic process to try to change those laws through the constitutional process. Listen, here's the thing. Fear mongering is powerful. Fear mongering works. The politicians have been telling us terrifying lies for years, right? Frankly, this guy is much more under a threat of dying by drowning in his bathtub than he is from dying from a threat of Islamic terrorism, right? But unfortunately, humans are very bad at judging relative threats to their health, wellness, and safety, right? He's probably, I bet the guy himself probably eats a lot of McDonald's cheeseburgers and a lot of chicken nuggets and drinks a lot of Coca-Cola, which is a far greater danger to him than Sharia law in the United States. But, again, if I just wanted to be a typical politician, I would find a boogeyman, I would demonize them, marginalize them, tell them that you're better than these people. They're rapists. They're coming. They're taking your jobs. And that would make me a much more popular politician because everybody loves being told that they're better than somebody else. There was a famous, I don't know if it was the Milgram experiment or I can't remember which one it was in the 1960s, where a school teacher sat down for a day and she tested her students on her students. She said, okay, people with blue eyes, they're beautiful. People with blue eyes are wonderful and lovely, and they're so much better than students with brown eyes, right? And then they found that the blue-eyed students started treating the brown-eyed students like crap. Then the next day, she turned it around and said that the brown-eyed students, they're much better. They're much smarter. They're much more beautiful. And then all of a sudden, the social dynamics changed, right? And that plays out in society writ large. But, don't use science, facts, evidence, reason, and logic on people who have renounced it because to them, that's only going to piss them off, right? If you're going to tell people the truth, you have to make them laugh or else they'll kill you. And that's the problem is that we love liars. We love politicians who lie to us. We love people like Bernie Sanders who tell us they can give us things for free. We love the politicians who demonize, marginalize, and oppress groups and say that you're better than these people. Our culture is inferior. And that's the thing. And we kill people like ourselves, Brian, people like yourself, people like myself. We destroy those people because they tell us we say the uncomfortable truths that nobody wants to hear. And that's why our country is going to crap. So technically, the culture of the person who asked that question is really what's destroying this country. And if anything, we should see if we can't, drop some deportation papers for him because I certainly want to make sure that I don't want him getting any welfare. That's for sure. We should deny his Social Security benefits, see what we can do to kick him out of the country because I don't like his culture. I think it's inferior to be quite honest.
All right. So to wrap up, Austin, I did want to just kind of go back to the entire premise of my podcast here, and that is to educate, enlighten, and inform. So this show, we have people from all different persuasions on, whether they be far left communists all the way to the most rabid anarchists, and the goal is really to bring these different philosophies, different ways of looking at our world, together to, at the very least, understand one another. So instead of sitting in our echo chambers and screaming at one another, we actually can have a dialogue. And even if we decide, hey, we don't agree with each other, we at least know where the other side is coming. So with that being said, as you, a libertarian, small L libertarian, Republican candidate running for U.S. Senate in Missouri, if you could take a person who is a Democrat, a moderate, an independent, who is I guess foreign to libertarianism, or the form of republicanism that you're bringing forward, how would you best I guess summarize your views and hopefully get them to vote for you in November this year?
Well, you're asking a strategic question, right? A tactical question. And so I would just say that the answer to that is that you want to be a good listener first. Right? Once you can determine what it is the issues are of concern to an individual person that you're trying to do outreach to, then you know what it is that they believe. Then you can find out what the best way to approach them is. And quite frequently, as a politician, someone who's campaigning for votes, what I'll do is I'll just ask people a series of questions and then listen to their concerns, and then I won't even have to say a single word about what it is I believe, and they'll say, you know what, you earned my vote just because you're being a good listener. So it's not so in terms of strategy and tactics, it's not so much about how to take your beliefs and force them on people, or how to convince people of your beliefs. Many times it's being a good politician is really just about being a good listener and about engaging with your constituents. It's a social skill, right? It's not an intellectual skill. It's not about who has the best ideas. If the person with the best ideas always won the election, then Ron Paul would have won the presidency, right? But that's just not what we see. You've got to be very social. You got to be affable. You got to be a good listener. That's really what it is. Be a good listener first. Determine what the problem is that the person says that they identify, and then see if you have some solutions or something kind to offer in order to solve the problem that they've identified in society.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate the candor, and honestly, I think this has been really a great opportunity for people to learn more, not only about your campaign, but also to learn more about not only you, but the values that you represent, and hopefully give a better insight into the small L libertarianism that we're trying to promote here. So as always, I mean, you can follow Austin on Twitter and on Facebook at AP for Liberty, and on your website, austinpetersen.com. Austin, anything you wanted to plug here before we send you on your merry way to your next set of interviews?
You got it all. Thanks so much, Brian. Have a great night.
You as well, man. Have a good one.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that was Austin Petersen there. He's as I said, candidate for United States Senate over in the great state of Missouri, running as a Republican against the current Attorney General in Josh Hawley to take on the incumbent U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill, who has been the Democratic senator now for six years? I believe it's 6 years? Yeah, 6 years. 6 years too long. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on Austin's interview? Please feel free to go ahead and tweet, Facebook, YouTube comments, what have you. Feel free to go ahead and like, review, and share on iTunes. Let us know your thoughts, and as always, please share this episode with your friends and family to hopefully give them a perspective into not only libertarianism, but also in terms of the values that we're looking for here in 2018 to bring them to the White House. That's always the goal, and I look at Austin as a candidate. This is my soapbox now. Austin, I think, is one of those candidates who we desperately need right now as libertarians, just because I'm not going to get into the Austin leaving the Libertarian Party and joining the Republican Party discussion, because I don't think that's productive. Looking at what we have as fundamental libertarian ideals, going forward, I think Austin is a great advocate. There's a reason that he was able to get on the shows like Glenn Beck back in the 2016 campaign, as well as most recently with his current Senate campaign, and to use that platform to promote true libertarian ideals, the likes that we really haven't seen in many candidates, be they, I guess the only real candidates we can think of are the Ron Pauls, the Rand Pauls, Justin Amash, and Thomas Massie. So, at the end of the day, we need more liberty-loving fighters there in Washington. And, if we can take someone like Claire McCaskill and replace her with a guy like Austin, I truly think we're in a much better situation than we are now. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Brian Nichols Show. Thank you so much for joining. Hopefully you found today's show to be educational, or as we always like to say, educate, enlighten, and inform. So hopefully all three of those buckets were filled today. But again, you can follow me on Twitter at bnicholsliberty, as well as on Facebook at bnicholsliberty. Or if you're interested, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon. Every little bit helps, folks. So every time we get a Patreon donor, it's easier for us to continue producing this type of content. And really, the goal is to help share this message of liberty across the networks to people from all political spectrums, really to help them learn what it is that we're trying to promote here, being the message of liberty. And again, if you could, please take a moment, rate us on iTunes. I think I'm going to start doing all 5-star reviews. You're going to get a read here on the air. So until next week, folks, it's Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show, part of the We Are Libertarians Network. Thank you so much. Thanks to Austin Petersen for joining me today. He's a pretty busy guy. So thank you to Austin for taking a few minutes out of his busy day to come on. But again, until next week, it's Brian Nichols. We'll talk to you then.